Welcome everybody, Steve Cady here with Theo Stiegler, the Executive Director for Nexus for Change, and we have a series of 30-minute high-impact webinars that we're going to be doing. And how we do these is we provide you with a very simple, straightforward, specific tool that's focused on change in 3 areas broadly: how we can transform organizations, revitalize communities, and develop human potential. And as we do all of that work, there are lots of little tools that we can use. And so what we'd like to do is provide these high impact tools in a short period of time. First, we're going to share with you the tool. Today, we're focusing on RACI+F. It's a tool to make sure you don't miss the critical rules for any project. And we'll explain more about that in a second. So we'll go over the basics of the tool. We'll then give you a case example. And last, we will pause for some questions and Q&A. If you have any questions to ask, please put them in the chat room, as we know, and we'll pull them out and we'll ask them then. So if you can speak live, we might do that, or we might go from the chat room. We have a few people here with us today, and we welcome you today with this session. So let's jump in. So have you ever been told, well, you really should have talked to, without her on board, without him on board, without them here, this is going nowhere? As a matter of fact, it could be, what happened? How did we crash and burn? What caused us to have a fatal error? And oftentimes, the question leads to who was involved and how were people involved in the process. And so RACI+F is a tool: responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, and facilitation was added. This tool was used to help people address that. Theo has a nice little story as he looked at the history behind RACI and where it comes from, which I find quite intriguing. Theo, you want to share a little bit?
Yes, so there's some debate, but it appears that the tool originated at NASA with really a decision-making process that needed, in the background of it, a clear structure as to who is responsible, accountable, who needs to be informed and consulted, so that in a crisis situation, when you see those pictures or those film clips of the center in Houston where they're all scrambling to come up with a solution in the moment to address a crisis situation in space, when somebody pushes a button to communicate with somebody, they know exactly what button to push as to who do I need to talk to at this moment. So in a lot of ways, it was a, again, responsibility assignment matrix. REM is what they called it originally, that identified these roles. And it was in many ways something that carried the weight of when we have to make life or death decisions for the astronauts in space, who do I need to call on? And it could be the difference between getting to the moon or burning up on the starting pad before anything has even happened.
And similarly, for any project, if we want to make sure that projects succeed versus fail due to critical failures or critical decisions, really the indications of failure in any project oftentimes occur 2 to 3 times before the actual incident that created the critical failure. And so that's an interesting piece when you think of failure and when they think of errors. The research shows that anytime there was a critical error, you just go back 1 or 2 decisions, and you'll find that there were 2 decisions back, there were early warning signs that that error was about to happen. So what RACI does is ensures that everybody's talking and everybody's communicating, and you got the right people involved so that you have a very successful project, a well-designed project, a well-executed project. And when things happen unexpectedly, you're prepared to handle that. I love what Barbara Bunker actually says, and Billy Albin, when they say the best plans are meant to be deviated from. And the only way you can be prepared for those moments is making sure that you have a well-oiled team, well set up, communicating and having the right people involved. So that's what RACI+F does. So let's walk through this. First, responsible. Who will do the work? So prior to understanding who will do the work, a lot of times projects are set up with what's the purpose and then who needs to be involved. So when you just look at who is responsible and who will do the work, you got to be going back to what's our purpose and outcomes we're trying to achieve. And then we got to come back into this and say, well, who's responsible for achieving these different steps and different things that we're about to do, different aspects. Then you move to who's accountable. Who will delegate or approve this? Who maybe is not directly involved in the day-to-day activities of the project, but who's accountable for it? If you fail, if there is some critical error, if you have some big problem, where's the buck going to stop, as it said? Where's the end of the line for responsibility or accountability? And be mindful of those people and how they get engaged and have their voice included in the project. So we got this responsible, and we're clear about who needs to be, how that voice needs to be included. We know that the accountable people, how to include their voice. Then we move to consulted with. There are lots of subject matter experts out in the world that know things, and they know little pieces of information, and they're not critical to the day-to-day operations of the project, but they're critical at a certain point in time, or they're important to the design of the project, or we need them in those critical moments that come up. And who do we need to consult with? Who do we need to bring in that expertise? And that is important. So who needs to be consulted with? And finally, who needs to be kept informed? Who needs to be in the loop? And so forth. And so as you go back to that purpose and outcomes, and you think about who's responsible, who's accountable, who needs to be consulted with. And here's the other thing. We talked about subject matter experts. I came back to this for a very important point. Users aren't the experts that we think of, like subject matter experts. Users oftentimes, they need to be consulted with to make sure that what we're designing is going to be user-friendly for the people that are going to be impacted by the project. So consulting with the frontline workers, consulting with frontline managers, that's also. So think outside of just subject matter experts and partners and internal consultants. Think about the users. Think about the people that are impacted. Think about the very end of the line of the project and what it's intended to do. Make sure they're consulted with and engaged. They have wisdom to share. And who needs to be informed? These are people that want to know what's going on. They don't need to be involved in the day-to-day operations, but they need to be informed. And sometimes they might even play both accountable. You might have to take the RAC and take that 3 groups and say they also, each of those people, some of those people need to not only be consulted with, they need to be informed. They also, not only are they responsible, but they need to be informed. Keeping people informed in communication and keeping updates and communicating with people in the right way. Some people need to be informed daily. Some people need to be informed weekly. Sometimes it's media and other ways. So there's lots of different tools and techniques for keeping people informed on what's going on. And the art of communicating and informing people is really key. In this day and age, people have a limited amount of time. You might say a limited time span. There's a whole new set of competencies coming out in this digital age, one of them being indistractability. That is, building the competency to be indistractable. And so people are learning how to focus on things. So how do you keep people informed in a way that's mindful of not distracting them and keeping them informed in ways that works for them? So now you move to facilitating. Who's going to help us? In major change initiatives and projects, there are different roles that people play. There are change managers, there are program managers, there are project managers, there are different people, there are design teams, steering teams, external part. All of these people that are helping the project move through the process. And there's also the role of technology. You can take facilitating and add to this notion of examples the role that technology plays in helping to facilitate the process. So all of those people and weaving them in, there's oftentimes in major change initiatives, there are change teams. And these teams are representatives of people from marketing and finance and accounting and engineering and technology and communications and human resources and training and development. And you got all these different people that are on one committee or one team that helps to manage the overall change initiative. Then you've got specific teams of people working within each of these flows, such as just in training and development, you got a team that represents people across training and development to help develop that flow of work. So these different teams, they're doing their jobs every day, but they're also serving on the change initiative to help facilitate that process. Then you've got external people coming in. And that's important to be mindful too. How are these people coming in that are external consultants and people facilitating, and how do you weave all of these different facilitation groups in and these experts that are helping with the process to ensure that it's executed efficiently? So, why the F? Taylor, you want to share a little bit about why the F? You seem to really like the F.
Certainly. Yes, the facilitation piece, as you can tell from maybe you've heard of RACI before. That acronym, as we shared earlier, started originally in NASA many decades ago, but the +F is a more recent addition, sort of as an insight to, and I really like, Steve, if you can go back to the previous slide, I really like this visual that sometimes it takes 5 people to push these 2 blocks together just so the 2 on the top can meet. A lot of times what we see in collaborative processes is that if you focus on the folks that are responsible, that are needing to be informed, that are being held accountable, that are being consulted with, you have a core group of people that are engaged in the process, but sometimes the part that gets them aligned and gets them together and gets them collaborating is lost. And that's where facilitation can come in, whether that's through a design team that meets prior to a big engagement, for example, and sets up the structures, for how people can interact, whether it's a steering team or a partner agency. We have found that it can be really meaningful to make sure that you have those folks on board, last but not least, because they can ensure and maybe double check that you really do have the right people at the table. One story that I'm reminded of always when we talk about this RACI acronym, and sometimes people think of the folks that need to be informed sort of as an afterthought, to say, well, oh yeah, okay, we also should let so-and-so know, we probably need to tell this leader or this particular sponsor. There was a story in a high school that I was engaged with where they came up with this really fantastic after-school math program. And a couple of weeks into the program, the football coach was trying to shut down the math club, and people couldn't figure out why until they realized that nobody had told them. And 2 of the biggest math geeks happened to be linebackers that were trying to skip weight room sessions in order to get to the math club. So a simple informing the football coach would have been meaningful, but nobody had thought of it. So if you bring in facilitators, they can oftentimes help make sure that you have the right people on board and that they can collaborate in a meaningful manner.
And if I may add, not only does that coach need to be informed, the coach needs to be consulted with. So the notion of consulting with someone, that's really important to be mindful of, informing people is not enough. That's the typical top-down, communicate what somebody else decided so everybody does what they're told. Informed is only powerful and impactful when you're ensuring that you're informing people who are also likely going to be consulted with, accountable, or responsible. So, and that coach needed to be consulted with as well. Not just informed, but consulted with, so that he had some input so they can make the right design. And the last but not least, in facilitating, what I'd like to offer, and then we'll move to the case example, is that in this day and age, we talk about diversity, belonging, inclusion, and we talk a lot about innovation. And I want to make a point that innovation only comes from diverse perspectives. And exclusion is easy because we exclude people that are different from us, like-minded folks, and we sit there that look like us, think like us, and are like us, and we just keep creating the same mousetrap over and over and over again. When you bring diverse people together, RACI, and you have all these different perspectives, that's where the real work happens. And here's the thing, the facilitating is such a key skill now in terms of helping people develop the competencies for collaborating in these diverse environments, bringing these diverse perspectives together. And so it's incumbent upon us to have the skills to bring facilitation into creating more healthy, collaborative, innovative environments. And you got to sometimes go slow to go fast, and that's the key. Building projects that have diverse, RACI-oriented involvement and so forth, building that requires time to build the competencies. So after you get through with one project, the next one gets better because people are learning a standard set of tools and ways to collaborate in more healthy, effective ways. And so you go slow to go fast. So what it's not, Teo? What's it not?
One word of caution is to make sure that the original intention of assigning roles and responsibilities is not the only thing that you're looking to achieve with this RACI tool. If you do some research, there's some folks that seem to be very allergic to the RACI tool because they've experienced it in their work environments as something that is used to push a certain responsibility or assignment onto me. And now I'm stuck in a role that maybe I didn't choose, that somebody else assigned to me. And it can actually sometimes disable the connectivity between people and between collaboration. So it's important to really utilize it to identify who needs to be here versus that's your role and now you're stuck with it. And we've established sort of a border between my responsibility and somebody else's consulting role.
And people often play more than one role.
That is very true. As you can see in this little example here, it's not necessarily just one item that somebody is responsible for or assigned to, but oftentimes somebody who might be consulting with you in a particular area might have accountability in another.
Okay. So
I do want to share that if you're interested in the specific facilitation piece, I'm sharing with you in the chat the link to a resource that we have established and built for a previous client that is a facilitator competency rubric that sort of lays out one view of how you could think of the role of a facilitator and what responsibilities that individual would have in this case, particularly in sort of a training and development context.
yeah, and what you can see here is this particular organization has their change methodology, which is called the impact collaborative phases: commit, catalyze, engage, collaborate, empower, impact. They use this framework with RACI on the left-hand side to guide them in rolling out a project across the different phases of this. And Teo, you want to share a little bit about this? We're getting close to ending time, so we want to share this and get open, at least answer a couple of questions.
Yes, as you can see, this is quite a comprehensive roadmap that they've laid out. On the left, if you follow from top to bottom, the rows, you see the identifiers for the different teams or work streams, if you will, that were identified for this process. So you have under work streams, things like governance, fundraising, evaluation, and so forth. You have partners and community leaders in the sort of pink there. And then on the bottom, you have groups that are helping facilitate, a steering team, design teams, and so forth. When this roadmap and this process was first introduced to a larger group during a conference that this client held, folks were sort of overwhelmed with the depth of this tool. And so a really great way to break it down, Steve, if you could go to the next slide, was to look at what are the subsets of people that are responsible, accountable, need to be consulted with, need to be informed, and facilitate the process. And so if you hop back to the first one, the folks that are both responsible and accountable are the ones that are in these work stream teams. So your fundraisers, your evaluators, each individual team would likely have a leader or a lead individual that would be the one accountable, the rest of the team, and that individual responsible. In the next group, in the ones that need to be informed or involved, these are community leaders, community contributors. This particular process that we're looking at is community building and community impact projects focused. And I'm sorry, Steve?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. And finally, we have the folks that are facilitating and bringing together and allowing these folks to collaborate. And so there's a steering team engaged. There is, before each event, design teams that convene that, to Steve's point, need to have maximum representation and diversity of the folks that are represented in these respective processes.
And I like to keep emphasizing that the F brings collaboration into this project management, and it really does focus on building the innovation and collaboration capacity in an organization in a complex system. Teaching people to fish is what F is all about, and helping the process to be more healthy at the same time. So, questions. You can unmute yourself, and we're gonna stop the share and open it up. And if anybody has a reaction or a question, we have about 5 minutes to wrap up and chat a little bit about this tool. Anybody want to unmute themselves and come in and chat with us?
If you're not able to speak live, feel free to type a question into the chat box and we will get to you there. I don't currently see any questions in the chat.
Hi, this is Gwen.
Hi, Gwen.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Hi, Gwen.
Hi. Is this tool online, available online? I wanted to read it more, have a deeper look at it.
I will provide, over the next couple of days, put together sort of a resource link that will probably be published in our blog, and I'll be sure that you get access to it there,
Yep,
as
so
well
you
as
can-
this video.
I love it. I love the concept. I love
Yep, and Gwen, you
being
can
able
get
to have something like this for my clients.
that's great, Gwen. And so you got the link there in the chat. You see the facilitator rubric there, and I think Taya's provide some access to what you see. The other thing you can do, Gwen, is you can easily go to YouTube and just type in RACI+F or just RACI, R-A-C-I, and you'll see some really, granted, you got to kind of weed through to find really good ones, but you'll see some more on that. Another trick that I really like is sometimes I just type out RACI+F space PDF and in Google. And at the end, when I put PDF at the end, it will only bring up PDFs related to those keywords in Google. And you can just read a few documents that are out there available across the internet.
Thank you.
Sarah's asking here in the chat, how would you differentiate the facilitator role from the project manager role?
That's a great question. So we oftentimes will have project managers who are responsible and very good at using Microsoft Project or the other types of tools like Asana or other tools for managing the project. And what they need is someone to help them bring in the collaborative technologies and skills, the organization development and change skills and facilitation skills into the process to help them focus on managing the project and the deliverables and mapping it all out. And then they need someone to help them build another layer in it at the collaboration level and help them to actually think it through and provide that process. So sometimes a project manager is also in a facilitator role and will be facilitating the project teams, facilitating the design of the project. And sometimes they need someone to come in and enable them to be at the table debating and working with others in the design of the project, with someone playing purely a role of facilitation. So it allows a person not to get into the content of the project, but to facilitate the discussion around making key decisions around the project. And that's a decision the project manager has to make. At what point can they step out? Because when a project manager is up at the board designing and facilitating, they will sometimes only hear what they want to hear and will only write down what they want in the project, and people may feel alienated from the process. So a good project management facilitator or a good facilitator can play that impartial role to help people have the kinds of meetings that they need. Sometimes you can do a bit of both. Sometimes you can play one or the other. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I hope, Sarah, that answers your question.
Yeah, she said yes. That's cool.
Okay, awesome.
And
Dan has a question. He wants to know.
Hold on a second. Someone's speaking.
I think that it's Carol. I think there's another element of that that's really significant. The skills historically to do project management don't involve people skills, and facilitator skills are emphasizing the people skills. It's a rare person who really does both well.
Yeah, and so collaborative change skills are becoming identified as important to project management, and some project managers are learning how to bring that in. Some of them are good at doing that, but it is becoming a part of change management, project management. That's why the field of organization development is adding in that C, where you hear organization development and change, because it's becoming a more of an interdisciplinary field for bringing all these things together, all these disciplines together. And for everybody, that was Carol Gorlick. She's the associate editor for the Collaborative Change Library, which you are hearing more about, which is the major collection of work from around the world. And you can learn more about that at Nexus for Change as well. Any closing questions or burning questions anybody has before we say goodbye?
There's one more question and a nice segue that you just gave me, Steve. Carol is also going to be a co-presenter for our next 30-minute webinar, which will be on Halloween Day, Thursday, the 31st of this month. She will be co-presenting a 30-minute webinar on the after-action review process. The link for that is in the chat box, as well as a link to next week's keynote with organization development and change thought leader Warner Burke that you are invited to.
And all of this is at the website, Teo? Teo, all of this is at the website as well, right?
All of this is at the website as well. If you go to nexusforchange.com and go to the events tab, all of that is accessible and available. Dan had, I think, a good closing question, Steve. He is asking, how important is it that individuals stay in their roles, or do these roles change over the course of a project?
I think I think Dan probably, knows that answer. And hi, Dan, it's good to see you here. I think it makes sense. There's this old adage, so it's really a fine balance. Stay in your lane. Okay, so in football, American football, stay in your lane means when you're going down the field, stay in your lane, otherwise someone's going to get through. And so everybody runs down the field in their lanes. And if you get out of your lane, and then in business and in organizations, people use that same analogy to say, stay in your lane and be careful not to be stepping on others' toes. I think a good team that communicates well and talks with each other knows to stay in their lane, do their job, be mindful when they're stepping out of their lane, and make sure that they're communicating as a team. So when things require changing of roles, you're doing it intentionally. I think the key is to do it intentionally, do it thoughtfully, and be transparent about it. I think that's the key. Anything else, Teo?
No, I think that that's a good closure to our session for today.
All right, great. So thank you, everybody. Again, Steve Cady here with Teo Stiegler, who's a director for Nexus for Change. You got Carol here. Great to see Carol with us, who's our associate editor for the Collaborative Change Library. You can find everything at nexusforchange.com. I also want to give a big plug out to Bowling Green State University, where I teach, and our doctorate in organization development change program. You can find out that by going to bgsu.edu/DODC to learn all about this professional executive doctorate that we have now, that we're sharing around the world with our first cohort this year. So bye, everybody. Hope to see you at the next 30-minute webinar. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.